Welcome to OhSister, where I unpack my Mormon sister missionary journals 10 years later. Hello and welcome back. I'm happy to have you. Before we jump in again today, I wanted to do a quick correction. I am my own fact checker and I try to make these as accurate as possible, but obviously lots of mistakes happen. I've probably already said many incorrect things with various levels of inaccuracy, but this one I did catch. So I previously was talking about the Exponent II, and I didn't really have the whole story right in my head, so I actually just went ahead and looked up their own description of like the history of this magazine. So let me just read that to you. I'm going to link the page where you can read more about them and where you can access this journal magazine, as well as I'm going to link in a like digitized version of the first edition of the original Exponent magazine from 1872. So let me just read this to you, and then you'll have it more accurate in your head of what the Exponent and the Exponent II are about, where they're from, etc. So here we go. Quote, "On a sweltering day in June 1974, a group of Latter-day Saint housewives, graduate students, and young professionals gathered in the Boston suburbs. Their mission to produce the first issue of Exponent II, a humble yet sincere newspaper poised on the dual platforms of Mormonism and feminism. They claimed it to be the spiritual descendant of the Utah-based periodical The Women's Exponent, which ran from 1872 to 1914, wherein their ancestors had wrestled with issues of women's rights and faith." So, thank you to the people who run the website for putting such a clear description of what the Exponent is, kind of the background of the Exponent, and then of course Exponent II. So when I, in the future, provide resources from Exponent II or the Exponent blog, that's what it's about, okay? So, now let's jump in. So, in my email that I wrote on like April 28th or whatever that Monday was, I wrote this, the following quote that I'm going to go ahead and read and we're going to talk about it. Okay. So what I wrote to friends and family at home was, "As Mother's Day is coming up, I've been reflecting on the influence the women in my family have had in my life. Without the gospel and their righteous diligence in following it, I would not be where I am today. I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't have the knowledge that we will be together forever. I'm so grateful for my grandmother, for the strength I receive every day from my memories of her stalwart faith. I'm so grateful for my mother, for the lessons I'm only just beginning to realize that she teaches me with word and action. Only as a missionary have I been able to see what a difference a wife and mother makes in her family, in her community, and in the world. I pray that I'll use every opportunity that comes to prepare myself to fill this divine role." Now, I've talked a lot about sort of womanhood and motherhood already on this podcast, but it clearly weighs on my mind a lot now, and also clearly weighed a lot on my mind when I was a missionary, so it looks like I'm going to keep talking about it. And so I was ruminating over this quote that I found, and, it does also come up in my journal some this week. I was trying to understand what my thoughts are on this. I don't want to, just, go ahead and say, motherhood is evil, because I obviously don't believe that, and, I know it's really important and good to be a mother, and obviously it takes a lot of sacrifice and dedication, and like a lot of my friends have children now or have had many children and are continuing to have children. And while that can be like hard for me to look at in some ways and wonder like, what do they think about me? And like, what do I think about them? And, I don't really want to be like shaming women for making sort of the impossible decisions. It's like kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Really, it feels like it's like no matter which choices you make, it's always the wrong choice and somebody's mad at you. And thinking about this, I remembered this really awesome interview that Margie DeLynn did a few years ago. And she talks about her journey like through and then now outside of Mormonism as being a woman, a wife, a mother. And I really like she's actually lived a lot of the like motherhood experiences that on my mission and even now I'd only like been socially programmed for and I hadn't really experienced. So I decided I want to just read. I went ahead and transcribed her interview, and I want to read through a chunk of what she said. There's obviously a lot more, and I really recommend going and listening to this interview if the things that I share intrigue you, because me reading someone else's words is not going to be as powerful as what hearing her say it herself, And she also has lots of other awesome things to say. So if you want to check it out, Margie DeLynn, she has an interview on the Mormon Stories podcast. She is married to John DeLynn, so that's kind of partly why this interview happened, but also I like to believe she would be interviewed even if she wasn't married to John, just because she's such an awesome person with such good ideas and perspectives. So yeah, link in the description to check that out. And here is, we're going to go ahead and go on a journey together, listening to her answering the question of how religious orthodoxy was not serving her well in the domain of like motherhood, marriage, that kind of thing, right? And it's a little bit long, but I like it all, and I think every point she made was resonating with me, so I'm going to go ahead and read it all. So apologies if this episode is a little bit longer, but I think worth it. So with all those disclaimers aside, here we go. Here are the words of the fabulous Margie DeLynn. Quote, "So the next question is, how is religious orthodoxy not serving you well in this domain?" And I think this is really, I feel like we were kind of touching on it a little before. One of the things that's come to me really in the last maybe 5 years is this idea of the church really supported, the system of the church in particular, really supported, in my view, my own disappearance and disconnect from myself. And it did this through a few ways, but the first way that I can really see is with this over-identification from my beginnings of my life with my purpose in life being to be a woman, to be a mother and a wife. And I think this whole paradigm and this expectation and formula of like, get married early, have as many kids as you can, have a lot of children. And this is all happening during a time where developmentally we're supposed to be developing ourselves instead. I think it just, big families are better. It's like you create this life that's defined by these decisions that you don't really understand until it starts adding up. And these decisions add up to a life. And I was really thinking about this the other day. I was mothering in a time where there was no Instagram. It wasn't like I could look outside and see what other women were doing or if there were other options for me. What I got was kind of this undiluted message from the church that my salvation and the salvation of everyone I love was dependent on me doing this well. It kind of hinged on me, and so it gives you this kind of fishbowl reality of what life should be. And it's reinforced when you go to church on Sunday, and what do you see? You see women with lots of children in pews. Everyone's sitting there in their Sunday clothes and acting fine, like everyone's fine. This is fulfilling. This is what we're meant to do. And so that's one thing where I feel like the church kind of supported this level of disconnect in myself. The second thing for me that's really important is I just find there were serious boundary issues. And here she keeps talking, but is visibly and audibly tearing up and showing some deep grief. So there were serious boundary issues around the expectation of women, just the expectation around what for a woman's psychology to have a bunch of children when she's young. How about physically to her body, what it means to have 4 children, on a body. Women suffer. They have damages to their bodies, but it's never spoken of. It's never acknowledged. It's like this sense it's genuinely not possible for many to have that many children all at once. It's not healthy for many to have that many children all at once for their bodies or their psychology. And this idea that so much, again, that all this pressure, my salvation and everyone I loved hinged on this offering that was never acknowledged. It was treated like a given, like I should just give it. It was never asked. It was never like, this is a hard thing. This is a tall order. The thing that you're doing is incredibly challenging. It's only been in the last 5 years that it's really hit me. And my children have been a big part of it as they've grown into young adulthood and really, I think, had their own relationship with how they want to live their life in relationships and if and when they want to have children, that I've recognized and to be able to say it felt hard because that was ridiculously hard. That ask was so boundary, breaking, and just so acknowledging to all the women out there, the sheer amount of work that was involved in creating this reality for those around me. I think, it feels hard because it is hard. And because what is asked of you is too much. For most of us, it was just too much. So another thing that I've recognized where the church seemed to support this disconnect too was this belief that, and this is a really big one for me, I'm curious if anyone else relates to this or if it's just like the way I kind of took the church teachings and how they talked about kind of motherhood, but I had this really belief that I could protect my children. And it's part of why I had children was I had this buy-in that I thought if I was righteous, if I did things like if I prayed and if I taught them and if we did family home evening and if we did all the things that I could not only protect them, but I could give them things that I didn't have growing up. I could show up in ways that, and now and love them in ways I'd wanted and that I could kind of ensure and provide joy for them, a life in a world of joy and protection. And I know that really, it sounds innocent to me now. I really did think that. And in my coaching, I know I'm not alone in that because a lot of women start out with that kind of idea. And then you're kind of amidst it, you realize, oh man, that is just so far off. But the reason why I bring that up is because that belief, that idea and belief and almost promise, if you think of interviews when you go in, anytime anything's going wrong in your life or you have any type of suffering, it's just are you doing these things, Are you praying? Are you, alleviate it? It's on you, correct it. And I think that it transferred over to me, this idea that I had this potential within me, superhuman potential, to create a world where my kids didn't suffer. If I could just do the right things. And that was my why. That's why I had 4. That's why I stayed home. That's why I did so much of what I did, was this idea of like, I'll do anything. I'll do anything for them, you know? So it was super harmful. Super harmful because it had me, the way I showed up and what I asked of myself and what I felt like, the why of what I was doing, it was never possible. It was never mine to give. It's not anyone's to give. A sense of security, a sense, it's on you, it's on your decisions. It's how you basically sacrifice yourself for someone else. That's not the way it works. It doesn't make people safe. It doesn't make people happy. It doesn't make people, it's all a lie. But I believed it. And it hits. The problem with it is, it hits people where they live. It hits you where you love. It hits you with your yearning. It hits you with what you want to be true. It hits you in your innocence, you know? We were young. And so that was something that I really felt like a belief that the church supported that in the end really hurt me. And I think sometimes it makes people have more children than they would have. Or, I mean, if you think about you have the answer, then you're like, yes, to them all, of course. It's just, let's apply the system. Sure, we can have 4 because we have the secret. Whereas if you go into it being like, life is full of vulnerability and, you know, it's a hard world and this is a tough job and this is going to require a lot of me, this parenting thing. And how am I going to be healthy as an individual and sort of embody what I want my child to see and claim for themselves by kind of emulating? I just think it's, for me, deeply problematic. I made decisions based on this sort of perception of how it worked, and I don't think it was just me. And then I decided to include this part as well because it relates to the Mother's Day thing I brought up. So her husband, John, jumps in and says, the church, I remember, every Mother's Day would make sure and give a flower out to every mom, or a cookie, or a cupcake or something, and then they would teach everyone, no, let's just be clear, motherhood is the highest calling. Was that any consolation? Did that make it better somehow? You know, that language, those ceremonies, you know, Mother's Day, primary songs to support moms. Did you feel really respected for your choice in the church? Honored? Did you feel honored and respected, and did that make it any better? So here's her response to kind of the John, he often says, like, I want to play devil's advocate and like ask, oh, well, you're saying this, but what they do this, so how do you respond? So here's her response. She says, I know I heard messages of honoring, particularly, I mean, I know there were those messages out there. I just think this is tough, right? Because I think culturally, what I would look at is, when you're looking at the experience of women overall in a church organization, in a church system, it just reminds me emotionally of this idea of Valentine's Day. When you're in a relationship with someone who kind of criticizes, puts you in a kind of lifestyle where you can never thrive, you can never show up the way they want you to. It's just not possible. But then on Valentine's Day, they give you a box of chocolates and say, great job. The other thing I've really kind of come to recently where I feel like religious orthodoxy did not serve me was, I feel like in some of these things I realize kind of build on each other, but this depraved and deprived sense of self that emerged from me going after the formula, getting married at 22, having, 2 kids really young, 4 kids within, 10 years maybe, is that you have this sort of depraved and deprived sense of self, which leaves you vulnerable to perfectionism. And let me explain that. I think, overall, I think religion sort of is built over this inherent unworthiness of humans. Like, on some level, there's a buy-in. That's why there's a Jesus who has to kind of save you. That's why, it's all about kind of your own thoughts. Everything's serious. Every action matters. Everything. there's a great deal always at stake. There's always kind of a proving. But I think with, so much of Mormonism in my experience was what it looked like. It was so externally focused. Didn't matter so much what you felt like, wasn't asked about, didn't really want to hear it either. That I feel like it sort of perpetuated this external overachieving, that it must look good. It must look effortless. It must look. And I think this comes to play when in diminished selves, it's like what happens when you're kind of given so little respect. There's this part of Little Women where, and this is what it reminds me of, when Meg comes home from a dance and she's been like, they don't have a lot of money, but at the ball they dress her really fancy. And she has this experience of being really disrespected and feeling on a level like women are so easily like disrespected and belittled and devalued. And the mom says something to the effect of, when you're given so small a space, when you don't have rights, when you're given this crumb and you're told it's a meal, it's easy. It's so easy to devalue you. You have no room, you have no space to be fully embodied. You're just this shadow of a human. And then the last thing I would say that came to mind for me, and this, there's a lot of dependence. I mean, when I look at myself, I view myself as like, I was dependent on my parents. Then I had went to college for a minute. Now I'm dependent on my husband. I have always, so much of my life was where I was dependent on other people. And I think so that's building this sense of codependency, right? And it also builds this support for enmeshment without an identity, without the sense of who I am versus who you are and how we come together. And when you go about it, when you're young, so young that you haven't been given a minute to develop into those people, you create these systems of codependency and enmeshment. So as a mother, my whole world is my children, right? And I'm told on a level in many, many instances and in scripture that I'm responsible for the lives of my children. If they don't believe, it's on me, right? And so this makes for a setup where you're overly tied to your children's behavior, to their happiness, in a way that is incredibly unhealthy, and it's not good for anyone. It's not good for the children. It's not good for the mom. Okay, so I know that was a little long, but I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. And again, you should go listen to it because right now I'm just kind of, reading through the script. But I just think she highlights these points so well of like the weird dichotomy of being a Mormon woman. And like, first of all, it's very transphobic. There is no inclusion of trans people at all in the Mormon doctrine. So I do want to acknowledge that because there's a lot of, in this, she's kind of talking about how women and mothers and wives are interchangeable. But that is also part of the problem that she's pointing out is like, even in her description of talking about how she grew up and she over-identified from the very beginning that her purpose in life was like what she was like over-identified with who she was. And even in her description, she cuts herself off, and instead of saying my purpose in life to be a woman, she kind of self-checks and realizes, no, it was like to be a mother and a wife. And there is this just like, to be a woman in the church is one and the same with being a wife and a mother. I actually, when I was thinking about what resource I wanted to share with this topic, I was like, let me just search on the church website, like Let me just search through all their general conference talks and just search like women and see what comes up. Let me try searching women career, see what comes up, and then like, role of women. And, even just searching women, all the titles, the top hits were like the role of woman is to be a mother, and like the divine role of women, and like motherhood. They were always like being a helpmeet and being a mother. And when I searched for women career, there were like 2 talks that within the last 10 years that have like slightly changed the narrative, where I think there's one from 2013 from like a young woman's or women's session or something, where there was one woman one time who said, oh, maybe women will have a career. Maybe women won't only be mothers. So there's like one talk from 2013. And then there was one from maybe 2018 or a little later where it looked like it was talking about young women, like maybe preparing to have a career. So there were like 2 talks that came up that, were not completely dedicated to saying that women are supposed to they're supposed to be virtuous young women and then grow up and be married and be a wife and a mother, right? Like that is what the church teaches, right? And I could see how on my mission I'm kind of wrestling with this idea, and I knew at a certain level that why I went on a mission was because I didn't feel ready to like be a wife, and I didn't feel ready to be a mom, and I knew that I was gonna have to do it, and that was literally my purpose for being alive, was to sacrifice and give myself in this way. And it was scary and hard, and so I was like writing stuff that I had been taught my whole life, and I was trying to believe it, and I was learning to believe it, and I was preparing to sacrifice my own identity as a person who could perhaps also be a wife and perhaps also be a mother, but like I knew that I was supposed to be fundamentally a wife and a mother, not additionally. Like I felt like to be a really good, righteous, good person, good woman, I needed to get married and I needed to have children, and hopefully I would be able to have a lot. And I was wrestling with that, and I just really appreciate how this is something that, I mean, cis and also trans women, right? Right, but so if you're raised as a cis woman in the church, then this is gonna be in your bones, this thing that is just always hanging over you, every decision you make. Oh, can I get on this medication? Well, if I am dependent on it, well, what happens when I need to be pregnant for 10 years? Like, I shouldn't get used to having a helpful medication for my mental health because I need to be able to go without medication for years and years at a time. Like, that is something that I did when I was at BYU, was I wouldn't go on, I was like afraid to start medications because I knew someday soon I was going to be able to I would need to be pregnant. And I was like, I can't take medicine that's going to make it so I can't be pregnant, right? Like, that's where I was. And for some of you, that might feel realistic. And for some of you, that might be like, wow, that's really intense. But I really appreciated how Margie points out the strange, like, the disconnect to yourself that starts from the very beginning, where you don't see any other option, especially, in her life. I'm fortunate to be exposed to a little bit more, and I've been able to make more choices about my life than she did at this point in her life. There's this pressure to just be fulfilled and fine with basing your identity on as a whole, your whole identity as an adult human, as your relationship with your children, right? Like, that is not as fulfilling as all the men in the church want it to be. It seems like, from women I've talked to, like, it's awesome to be a mother. And also, if that is your only identity, is your relationship to your children, like, that can be really intense and stressful in your relationship with yourself and your spouse, if you're married, and your children. I really appreciated that she brought up the physical realities of pregnancy. And I mean, for some women, I know women who, you know, my age and younger, who have been struggling to have kids, who aren't able to have kids, and that's hard enough if you just, like, deeply want that, right, as a human. But if you've been raised that, like, your purpose for being alive is to be a mother and to have children and bring spirits into the world, and then you have struggle, like, having children, it's, like, so devastating. And I, you know, just, like, the people who have opened up about this with, you know, like, it's, like, it's not only the loss of the child and, like, the children and the family that you wanted someday, but it's, like, the loss of your value in, like, your whole society. It's the loss of being seen as a real person. It's like you've let everybody down. It's so hard to see anyone go through this, but especially if they're in this context. But then, of course, if you do have children, just, like, one pregnancy is so hard. And, you know, I haven't even had to deal with this myself yet, but, you know, people talk. But the hypocrisy of being in the church and having it's so common that all these old white men, I mean, probably every man says this, whether or not they're white, but there's all these men in the church are always talking about how good it is for women to be righteous and raise righteous children and have lots of children and multiply and replenish the earth. And they just have no, like, the only stake that they have is, like, their own relationship with their own wife. And hopefully they're, like, a good, sane partner and are, like, supportive and are, like, helping their wives when their wife has to be on bed rest for, like, 9 months because for her it's just too much. Or, like, you know, it's just, it can be so hard to be pregnant, to give birth, to recover from giving birth. And she's right, it's, like, not acknowledged in the church talks. They're just all these little platitudes around how much we love mothers and how important motherhood is. And it's infuriating for me. Even when I was, like, fully Mormon, sometimes I would be like, wow, I understand why my mom kind of hates Mother's Day at church, because it's so dismissive of the real physical sacrifices, just, like, setting aside the whole, like, identity and psychology of it, just the physical suffering and pain and, like, sometimes death and permanent disability that happens from having children that you have been told your whole life you must have. You must have as many as you can. And even if your doctor says it is dangerous for you to have more, I know women who continue to have babies because they believe so deeply that their value and their purpose is to bring more children into their family. And it's so cruel, right? This framing, which is largely given to us by men. And I appreciated what she said about the idea that if she could just be righteous enough that her children would be protected. This is a widespread idea. And of course, then, you know, she has all these children and then it turns out it doesn't work. And even at this point in my life, I had seen how, like, my mom had been taught this, you know, explicitly to her, but also in all of her time in the church, you know, all these church talks, especially in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there were so many talks of like, women shouldn't even have jobs. You should really only be a stay-at-home wife. You should only just be a stay-at-home mom. They've eased up slightly lately, but you know, when my mom was my age and was the age I was of my mission, like that's what she was hearing. And it's so cruel to tell women that if you are perfect, then your children will be safe and righteous. And if they're not safe and if they're not righteous, it's your fault. And I remember like seeing my mom like being so torn over this because obviously things weren't always perfect for her kids, you know, like sometimes stuff just happens and like sometimes kids grow up and they're like, oh wow, the church actually seems like bad to me, and it was so cruel, and it is so cruel. And it's not just my mom. This happens to, I think, every mom in the church, where they tell you from primary on that if you are good, that your children will be safe. And then you get married young and you have as many children as you can. And then your children are actually just in the world, and whatever religious compulsions you have, no matter how much you do them, it doesn't actually protect your kids from like getting bullied or like freak accidents, you know. It's really cruel. And of course, you know, there's the last thing I wanted to say was I was reading this awesome book while I was in Utah. My dad he's been like interested in church history for a long time and has lots of awesome books, and he was like, hey, you should check out this book, and it's by Sonia Johnson. It's called From Housewife to Heretic. You know, she's not perfect, I think, but I really related with a lot of the stuff that I was reading, even if all of it was like not totally balanced, but a lot of it I was like, I can tell that this is not super balanced, and I also 100% agree. So I have loved reading this book, but she talks about what it was like to grow up as a young girl in the 50s, and then, you know, a young Mormon girl in the 50s, and then being a housewife, and how psychologically like tormenting this was. And she just is recalling when she was a teen, she would go and like, I can't exactly remember what it was, something about like, she would often go on these long walks and just like be like talking, kind of praying to God, just like missing something, wanting something. And I'll just read, you know, what I wrote what she writes. She wrote, What did I want? I didn't know, but oh, how I wanted it. And I read that, and I had to just like take a minute after reading that, and I was just like, wow, I could have written this, I could have written this, because here I am, 30 years old, trying to exercise the muscle of knowing what it is that I want with life. And I don't know what it is exactly, but I know, like, oh, how I want it, Like, I want so much to, like, find my drive and sort of my purpose, not the purpose that was taught to me, not the purpose of some group with an agenda, but like really deeply at my core, just like on a basic emotional level, when I respond naturally to something with like joy and excitement and like, yes, like, what is that? What do I want to make of my life? And I feel really grateful to be at a point where I'm like getting a lot of help with that. But when I was younger, when I was on my mission, I certainly was being pushed in the other direction, was pushing myself in the other direction. And I just think of all the women kind of throughout all time who've, because of the way, we've been forced into keeping ourselves small, or just this situation that we're in, no matter the desires that you may have, you just have to stay small anyway. But I feel that, like, people talk about like the feminine rage, like all feminists are angry, but it's just like the grief and the realization that, like, so many of us, probably there are men who've kind of had to do this too, but just like having been trained to not even know what it is that is you is just so ridiculous. And it's just something that I want to honor and acknowledge, I guess. And this has gone on plenty long, so I'm gonna go ahead and put a stop here for now, so we can get on to the actual journals from this week. So let's go forward with that. I've been having a great time working on this project, and it takes a lot of time every week to keep this up. If you have the desire and the means to support me financially, your donations are really effective at communicating to me how this has been valuable for you, and it really helps a lot. Of course, I have the disclaimer that your donations will not bring eternal salvation for you or anyone else, but there are links in the description where you can make a one-time donation, or you can sign up to be one of my monthly patrons to help support this and my other creative work. Thank you, and let's get back to it. Monday, April 27th, 2015. Mission Day 199. Today during emailing, I learned from Mom that Grandma Gladys is sick and doesn't want any intensive care. She might not have much more time. I've actually consciously felt Heavenly Father preparing me for this time throughout my mission. It will be powerful, I think, when I can couple my efforts with hers beyond the veil. Wow. So yeah, I guess we can see now partially why I was thinking so much about not only motherhood, but about my grandma in particular. So I found out she was sick and was kind of just done, right? And fortunately for me, she did live through and I was able to see her at the end of my mission, but I didn't know that at this point. And it's interesting with that knowledge, looking back and saying how it felt like Heavenly Father was preparing me for this, like preparing me for what I didn't say, but what I meant was I felt like God was emotionally preparing me to deal with the loss of my grandmother, who, I had never even been able to meet my other grandmother, so, it's like all, it's hard, right? It's hard to lose your grandparents. And the way that I was trying to sort of deal with this grief, and I was like, oh, Heavenly Father's preparing me for this because, well, he knows when, like, people are gonna die, so if I'm on my mission while she's gone, then I get the blessing of getting to be a missionary and have her angelic help from beyond the veil while I'm a missionary. So in a way, I'm closer with her and I get this like special connection with her. Which now I look back on and I'm like, okay, well, that feels a little twisted. But I can understand why I was thinking that way, but it just shows how I was really doing everything I could to sort of double down on, yes, I'm supposed to be a missionary right now. Yes, no matter what happens, it's just evidence that I'm here for the right reasons. I just need to keep working hard. If my grandma dies, it's sure sad, but really it's just a blessing in disguise because obviously God knew when she was going to die because he knows everything. So if I'm here while she's gone, it's not just like a sad tragedy. It's actually supposed to be. And how can I make that make sense? Well, she'll help me on my mission, right? Like, there's a lot of kind of mental gymnastics here and trying to figure out how to navigate like an all-knowing, all-loving God and me being on a mission away from my family and then finding out like, oh, my grandma might pass while I'm on my mission. A lot of now what I look back on and I'm like, that feels like culty, brainwashy weird to me now. I wasn't allowed to have grief and I wasn't allowed to like acknowledge even that it was just sad. I was just like writing in my journal, okay, well, God's been preparing me. It'll be powerful. She'll help me with my missionary work. And then in my email home, I just wrote like, oh, I'm just so grateful for the example of righteous women. And I'm just like working on being a righteous woman, just like more religious platitudes and like just focus on the goal, focus on climbing the ladder. Don't think about how I feel, right? Okay. Tuesday, April 28th, 2015. Mission day 200. Okay. Sister Crompton left us today. Sister Feist tried to stall by taking us to Sonic, but that didn't really work. We still went to the mission office in Rapid and dropped her off. And then there were two. We've done a lot of cool things with her, especially with music. This morning, I wrote a letter to Grandma, thanking her for her example and promising I'd do my best to be obedient and loving and trusting in the Lord's plan for me. We had an awesome last trail lesson with Marvin. So we went to see him in a VA care unit, a veterans care unit, and he was outside smoking, and then I did like a kind of frowny face. He just told us that he'd quit smoking, so that was no bueno. But we shared Joseph Smith's first prayer, the hymn, to the tune of Come Thou Fount. And the Spirit came super strong, and he just sat and listened in peace. We hadn't planned ahead at all what to say, but as the Lord has promised, I knew exactly what I needed to tell him. I said that the Spirit he feels when we come and sing, he can feel it all the time when he surrounds himself with things that invite it. And we've been given the word of wisdom in parts that we can always feel the Spirit. At this point, Marvin says he went back to smoking just because he was super bored, and it's the one thing the hospital lets him do. That totally makes no sense. So we downloaded the Gospel Library app on his phone, and we'll show him how to work it. Okay. So going backwards, clearly we were not like addiction specialists or like mental health specialists, but here we are trying to get people to quit smoking. Honestly, I wonder how much of missionaries going and trying to get people to quit smoking, like how much do we just make it worse? You know? I don't know. And so silly that he's like, well, I'm bored, I'm stuck in a hospital, they let me do smoke breaks and I go out smoking with people and that's like our nice ritual, right? And my takeaway is, oh, you're bored? Let me give you the church's scripture app so you could be unbored by listening to recordings of general conference and scriptures. Like, oh, those are so boring. If you have not grown up having to listen to and read religious materials constantly, day in and day out, over and over and over again, you have no idea how mind-numbingly boring it is to do this. And this is all we could have accessed. This is all we were allowed to read on our missions was scriptures and like church conference talks. So, we would get excited if there was one that was on a slightly different topic, but how silly, but really how like rude of us to be like, oh, we could get you to quit smoking. Just get this scripture app and read that one. Like, ugh. So inappropriate. Also, I just wanted to point out this was one of my like calling card beliefs that I would just harp on always, was this idea of like, being able to have the Spirit with you. And it was often connected with music, which has made my life so complicated in the last few years. But, I was like, we sing you this nice song. We all feel good together. And then I'm like, okay, here's how it works. Slamming the table. Sorry, I hope that's not an uncomfortable noise to hear. But here's how it works. You do what God tells you to do. Then you feel the Spirit. You feel good and peace and loving and comforted. And you can't have that if you break the word of wisdom, which you're doing. So you've got to stop, and then you'll feel good all the time. And it's interesting that I say this because a little bit earlier when I was talking to, I believe her fake name was Ruby, there was a woman I talked to in my first area, and she was a Mormon who just didn't always go to church and had some health issues, and she smoked. And I read through a thing here about how I was a little more understanding with her, and I was like, yeah, I can see that like she smokes because she kind of needs this as a support in her life. And like I understand why she doesn't necessarily want to do this, but it's just like one of the things, it's like not the best tool of support, but it's like one that she has and it's one that works, and I could see why it's hard to like not do that. But here with this guy, I'm like so unsympathetic and so like obtuse and just like really kind of oblivious and naive in a way of like, oh yeah, you are addicted to nicotine, you're addicted to smoking. It's more than, it's even more than that. It's like all of the like underlying trauma and dysregulation and like the positive memories associated with doing this for maybe your whole life, and like the friendships. It's like such a deep, layered, complicated thing. And to just tell somebody, oh, I sang you a song, it felt nice, stop smoking, read scriptures. It's like, I thought it was so simple, and it really, really isn't. And yeah, I guess just, in line with how I was getting so entrenched in sort of religious Mormon orthodoxy, I was not only like losing my sense of self as a person, like I was also even losing like kind of my good sense. Like instead of getting older and getting more good sense, I was like getting older and getting like worse judgment, it seems. I mentioned at the beginning that Sister Crompton left us. If you forgot, because I didn't explain it here, she was Sister Crompton in my trio with me and Sister Feist and Sister Crompton. Sister Crompton was like emergency transferred to go be with another missionary, like in another part of our mission, because someone had to like go home for an emergency thing. So yeah, this finally happens. And then it's just me and Sister Feist. So that'll be interesting for the rest of the week to see if the dynamic changes, to see if I'm maybe a little bit more open emotionally, a little more honest about what's going on, what I want, what I'm worried about. When there's not two other people, if there's just one, spoiler alert, I really don't think that I'm going to be more open. I think I'm still going to be just as kind of masking and trying to just not, just passive aggressive, right? So that's part of this. And then, the thing about the letter to my grandma. So I knew that my grandma was, creaky chair, sorry. I had gotten news that she was sick. She might not have much longer. And I think the desire to connect with someone before they pass is pretty real and deep, primal, right? But the way that I felt like I could best connect with her and like best be loving to her is so telling, right? Because I guess I could say this happened to me recently in my life with someone, I'm, not an immediate family member, but I recently had the chance to go see someone when I had found out that they would be passing soon. And I was like, yes, gotta go see them. And then just show up and just talk and like, look, here's what, let me tell you about my life. Like, I want to hear anything you want to share. It was just like, I just want to be there with you, and I just want to tell you what's going on with me, and I want to know like whatever it is that you want to share, right? But the interaction that I felt would be the most supporting and loving and like healing for me to have with my grandma through a letter was to do this. I said, I thanked her for her example, aka being a righteous wife and mother. And then I promised I would do my best to be obedient. I promised I would do my best to be loving. And I promised I would do my best to trust in the Lord's plan for me. So I was like, I knew that the best thing to be like a good granddaughter was to be really obedient and to be really loving and peaceful and to trust the Lord's plan for me and to go home. I'm being a good missionary, going above and beyond, and then I'm gonna go home and I promise I'm gonna get married in the temple, and then I'm gonna have kids, and I'm gonna be a good mom and a good wife, and I'm gonna support my husband and his callings with the priesthood. I will listen to his righteous inspiration. I will teach my children to be good, righteous people. I will serve in my ward. I will play the organ and the piano, and I will sing in the choir, and I will always put God and his church and my family first. You can't see, but I'm just sort of gesturing to everything. Hence the unpacking that I am now doing, right? Yeah. Deep in the Kool-Aid. Deep in the Kool-Aid of religious patriarchy that is so insidious that it gets into all of our close familial relationships, our friend relationships, our community, all the social things. They just get so tied up in this. Yeah. Okay. Wednesday, April 29th, 2015. Mission Day 201. I forgot to say that yesterday morning when I woke up, I was in Sister Feist's bed and she was in mine. Apparently, since I had gone to sleep while Sister Feist was still up and about, cleaning and organizing, my sleepwalking was set off, and I walked around our Spearfish apartment for a bit until I went back and laid down on her bed. I haven't sleptwalked in a long time, so that's kind of surprising. My brain must be stressed some. Smiley face. Sister Feist and I, no Sister Crompton today, drove out to Sapphire Ridge, Montana. It took about an hour from Custer, and we passed through a corner of Wyoming on our way there. We had a nice evening/afternoon with Sister McAvoy. She told us about her family, and we skipped Ward Missionary Council meeting to watch their family go roping, mostly for her son to practice for the rodeo. She also fed us scrambled eggs, strawberries, and toast for dinner, and she sent us home with leftovers. Man, I still remember Sister McAvoy. I remember their ranch. I remember her kitchen. I don't specifically remember skipping Ward Missionary Coordination meeting to watch their family roping practice. I do remember like getting after her for not coming to church and for her being like, well, I'm like more than an hour away and it's rodeo season and it's really important for my son to be at all these events and they're always on the weekend. And Sister Feist and I, we were just like, oh man, like, I mean, it's up to you, like eternal salvation, or like your son gets to do rodeos for a couple years. Like, I don't know, it doesn't seem that hard to me, but I'm really glad she was a tough woman and could see through our manipulation and didn't just kowtow to us and stuck with them. She continued to not come to church, and she supported her son in his rodeo aspirations, and I now think that is a good choice. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the sleepwalking thing. So I guess it was, I guess the night before Sister Crompton left. So I think there were 3 of us there, and okay, I'm not sure exactly, but somehow Sister Feist was up and cleaning and organizing, and I just was like, well, it's bedtime, so I'm going to go to sleep. And that was super against the rules, actually. You're not allowed to be, you know what, I'm going to get up and go get the white handbook so I can read to you the rules. 1 sec. Okay, literally 1 second later for you. I went and found my little white missionary handbook. And I figured out where it was. It's in the section Relationships with Others, subsection Your Companion. So, and then there's a section called Stay Together. So I'll read the part that relates to this, that I would have been reading from this every day. So I remember this 10 years after my mission. So clearly at the time that this was happening, I would have really known that we were totally breaking the rules, but I'll talk about that in a second. Here's what it says. Stay together. Never be alone. It is extremely important that you stay with your companion at all times. Staying together means staying within sight and hearing of each other. The only times that you should be separated from your assigned companion are when you are in an interview with the mission president, on a companion exchange, or in the bathroom. Never make exceptions to this standard for activities that seem innocent but take you away from each other, including being in different rooms in the same building or in a home. Situations that seem harmless at the beginning can quickly lead to serious problems. If you live in an apartment with more than one room, always sleep in the same room as your companion, but not in the same bed. Arise and retire at the same time as your companion. Do not stay up late or get up early to be alone. Yeah. So, the missionary handbook explicitly tells you to never do, ever, what was happening, which was, Sister Feist, it was time in our schedule to go to bed, and I was like, well, I don't know if Sister Feist was helping Sister Crompton, like, pack, or if she was just, like, had the wiggles and just, like, had to clean. I don't know. But I wrote down she was still up and about cleaning and organizing. And there was I think, if I remember correctly, which my memory's not perfect, but I remember there was a lot of little infractions like this going on all the time at this point in my mission, and it was making me crazy because I had been taught to not have contention, to talk peaceably, and to not to be angry, and also to be obedient. And they were the senior companions, and it was just all this stuff. Like, if little stuff like this is happening all the time, it's like, at some point it's just like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna follow the rule, and I guess you're just not going to. So, but that's also, the handbook, if I keep reading, it says, if you notice any inappropriate situation or behavior, discuss it with your companion. If the matter is not resolved, have the courage and love for your companion to ask your mission president for help. Violations of missionary standards may threaten your companion's effectiveness, and even his or her salvation. Care enough for your companion to ask for help from your mission president. Your loyalty is first to the Lord, then to your mission president, then to your companion. So basically, we were trained to be like tattletale snitches, and I can't remember if I snitched on my companions. I like to think that I didn't, but actually, I have my emails to my mission president. So maybe next week, for my preparation for the next week, I'll go ahead and read through what was I emailing my mission president at this time. Did I ever snitch on my companions for breaking the rules? So stay tuned. But yeah, that was giving me stress, in addition to all the other millions and billions of stresses and repressions and pushing down when I'm angry and frustrated. Clearly I was stressed. Also, if I am, stressed, and if I am gonna have like sleep talking or sleepwalking triggered, it seems like if I'm asleep and then like I'm kind of disturbed by someone like coming in the room, that's when it's more likely to like kind of set off my sleepwalking. So Kind of makes sense. But my final point on the sleepwalking thing is, I was talking with somebody who listens to this podcast, and she said it was really interesting how when I was in the MTC, I wrote like, wow, my brain is so tired, or like, like not my body is tired, or like I'm tired. Maybe, I don't know. There was this way that I was saying, wow, something about my body is so tired, instead of just like, I feel so tired. And here I am doing this again. I'm not saying, oh man, like, yeah, thinking about it, I'm sleepwalking, but like that makes sense because it's been really stressful, and like I've been really stressed and like kind of overwhelmed and like often at my wit's end, like even if this is like really fulfilling and all that. But no, I have this like degree of separation where I can't even say I feel or I'm stressed. I just write, my brain must be stressed some, smiley face. Which like totally gives like the vibes of, I don't know, like it's like I'm watching some creepy Twilight Zone video, or like, I don't know, some weird cult movie where like, is Pleasantville's coming to mind? I've never seen that, so I don't know. But there's just like this cultural image that we have of like people in cults like being like creepy and like smiling all the time and like never like deviating from the prescribed required conformity to like the level that they don't even stop smiling. And it's like, oh my goodness, I'm literally doing that in my journal. So yeah, the smile in there really got me. So okay, let's keep going. Thursday, April 30th, 2015. Mission Day 202. We had a lovely lunch with Sister Lyman after a morning with the parrots and area call. She was still busy in the kitchen when we arrived. Fortunately, we came prepared with my binder of music. For a good half hour, Sister Feist and I did a mini performance in her living room. It was pretty perfect, especially because in the middle of it all, Sister Lyman's daughter, herself a grandmother, came in to join us. Woot woot! I really enjoyed the time to sing with my normal voice. For dinner, as the ranching culture would say, I guess because it was lunch, we had roast, potatoes and gravy, corn, rolls, cabbage salad, and deviled eggs, followed by yellow cake with chocolate frosting and lemon bread. We listened to stories of ranching and hunting guides, and we were able to go towards family history, which her daughter's husband is in love with, except he doesn't know how to use a computer. She is going to enlist our help in recording Sister Lyman's memories and putting them on Family Search. I'm so excited to do that, and an unexpected member present for the week! Exclamation point, smiley face. We ran to the museum afterwards, where I purchased a bronze aspen leaf pendant Rowan has been eyeing for years, and I found it here. I'm sending it to them with a cute pink note and some heart stickers in a pink envelope, so they'll recognize when it gets there. And then we drove to Spearfish to swap for exchanges. On our way out, I totally thought I locked the keys in the apartment, and we definitely couldn't break into our stalker-proof windows. Fortunately, they ended up being in the back of the Jeep. I went with Sister Harris to Rapid City, and Sister Alger stayed with Sister Feist here. We got to go tracting in an upper-middle-class neighborhood, which helped me really remember why I love tracting in more run-down apartments. However, this was the first time I've been tracting this transfer, so it's nice to have that again. Helps me feel more like a missionary, smiley face. Remember the cattle branding Mona and Charlie Meyer at their family ranch that Sister Crompton and I went to a while back? Well, while we were there, we met Sherry, Jared, and Alyssa, their daughter, Beeman, a recently converted family from Rapid City. I tell you this because they were our meal appointment for supper. It was pretty awesome to see them again, to go on that one day and just happen to eat with the one family there that I met. And Sherry told us all about the awesome less active work she's already doing, and I was feeling pretty inspired and impressed. Oh boy. Okay, to the top. So if you don't remember who Sister Lyman is, who we went to have lunch with, except we called it dinner because she's from a ranching family / my grandparents also called it breakfast, dinner, supper, but, so I don't know if it's like a Midwest, Western, I don't know, just country thing, but anyway, we had dinner with her. So she was the widow whose children had gotten her a house, they bought her a house or something, I don't know. They got a house and she was moved to be in this house in this town, and she had been out on her ranch and she didn't want to come be in town, but I guess it was just at the point where she needed more people around or something. Anyway, that's who Sister Lyman was, and she had us over and made this really fancy, beautiful meal. Also, their house was like a really cool old, 2-story plus Victorian house with all this cool decorations and stuff. So I remember that. I remember the living room and singing the music, waiting for the dinner to be ready, and of course we would offer to help, but people would be like, no, just wait. And we sang, or I guess Sister Feist played piano and I sang probably, and I wrote, I really enjoyed the time to sing with my normal voice. So let me explain what that was. So I had this, I was not yet in the voice program at BYU, but that was my hope, was that I would be able to be a music major and study classical voice. And I'd been training that for a long time. But I had this sense, that when I was a missionary, I needed to sort of be the homogenous church person. And I shed all aspects of myself, and I only let small parts of my real self come out in small moments. And part of that was I would sort of just sing half-heartedly and not my full voice, because partially I was just kind of shy and embarrassed to sing with my opera voice. But also I think I had this sense that I wasn't supposed to be really good at singing and be better than other people, or that I not necessarily better, but I didn't think I was supposed to stand out, right? So here we had this chance to we weren't in a church, we were just at someone's house, and the point was to help this lady feel loved by God. So I was oh, here's a setting where it's okay for me to just really sing and really enjoy the music. And just for this one little short half hour, I got to sing for real, even if it was kind of just random church songs. And it was actual joy, and looking back on that is sad, because I don't think I had to do that. I don't think I had to separate that much of myself out. I think the church would have actually been happy to use my singing for me as a missionary. But either way, it's sad to look back on that and see how much I was seeing as just, even I was well, clearly I was not going to express or show parts of myself that I thought were bad, but even parts of myself that were I would have seen as good, notable parts of myself, even that I was I can't, I gotta hide it. I can't be me. Yeah. Um, the lunch sounds like it was really nice, but it is a little frustrating to me now looking back to see how clearly there was an agenda to like, okay, we can't just like go and appreciate this woman who's like getting used to the new area and she wants to make friends, so she's having missionaries over and she made us this nice lunch and she's telling us stories. We can't just like take that and be grateful. We have to turn it into a lesson. So I'm like, oh, we like steered it into family history and we like made it into this church lesson thing. And then at the end I wrote an unexpected member present for the week. So I guess one of them was considered less active. I don't know who. And so we're there having this lunch with a woman and her daughter, and then we go home and we write in our area book and our planners, check mark, there's another lesson, there's another key indicator showing that we're good missionaries. Like turning that into a number to report that we're like making progress working with less active members, and there was a member there, which was like a bonus. It just feels really icky to me now. Like so many of my interactions when I was Mormon, but it was just like amped up to the nth degree when I was a missionary. There was just this like underlying like, what can I get out of this relationship? What can I get out of this interaction? It was always transactional. It wasn't just like, oh, there's someone on the street and for whatever reason I end up talking to them and like, oh, I made a nice, cool human connection. Like, what a beautiful thing to experience in my one and only precious life. No, it's like anytime I talked with a friend or a family member or just a random person on the street, it was to get something out of them and to like get higher numbers and to like to like show God I'm a good member and I'm a good missionary, and to like try to get them to be a Mormon or to be more Mormon or to be a better Mormon. Ugh, I don't miss that. And okay, talking about the tracting in an upper class middle neighborhood, just I guess just I don't have to dive into it, but just sort of the sweeping problem of the like classism that's just like clearly a big part of being a missionary. And I was just like, I was like, I'm just gonna say it like it is. I don't like tracting rich people's neighborhoods because they're intimidating and they don't want to give me the time of day, and I like going to rundown apartments because people who are struggling and are vulnerable are struggling with poverty and stuff are more vulnerable to joining cults. But also I didn't feel as intimidated. I don't know. I should probably dive into that at some point. I won't right now, but yes, that is what was going on. There was this weird classism thing going on. Yes, acknowledging that. And also the fact that I said it was nice to go tracting again because we haven't been all transfer, and it helps me feel more like a missionary, which is funny because I think that was true. Like, I hated tracting. It was so hard and so scary and always felt icky and weird and like bad to just go try to get strangers like to bother people about the church. But I knew it was what I was supposed to be doing, and it was so distressing to not be following the rules and not be doing missionary work the way that I believed that I was supposed to be doing it. So having the chance to just go knock on people's doors felt so relieving, which feels really messed up. And then also, yeah, I guess I never wrote about going to this like big cattle branding thing, which is a shame because I totally remember it, and it was like, I have a lot of pictures. It was really interesting. it was kind of uncomfortable because we were just there kind of hanging out. There wasn't anything for us to do. And I went, I guess was just me and Sister Crompton. I don't know why Sister Feist wasn't there. I feel like she would have wanted to be there, but I guess there was, I don't know, some reason that she wasn't there. I don't remember. I didn't write it down. But yeah, for some reason, Sister Crompton and I went to a cattle branding event, and we watched, we ate, you know, we wore jeans, we wore the service jeans that we'd brought, and we talked to the people there, and it was Mona and Charlie Meyer's family ranch. Mona, I think, was LDS. I don't think Charlie was, so I guess that was maybe partially she, like, wanted us to have a connection with her husband, and, like, I don't know, but I remember it being kind of awkward. I didn't really know what to say or who to talk to. I think we had dinner in the barn. Anyway, and then I had to write about how there was this whole miracle of, like, we met a family there, and then I was on exchanges with the sister training leader, and the sister training leader's companion, and who would have thunk I would end up going to dinner with this one family, and instead of it just being sort of a coincidence that actually kind of makes sense, since these are the circles that I run in this area where most people are not LDS, instead I was like, oh look, here's a nice little miracle of the day, you know. Counting miracles, and it's like, nah, actually that does make sense. It's just kind of like a kind of statistical probability that happens every once in a while when you're in an area where most people are not this religion. And even if most people are, like, 7 degrees of separation, you know, every now and then you just run into someone, right? So, not as impressive, I think, as I thought at the point. Okay. Friday, May 1st, 2015, Mission Day 203. Happy May Day! So while I was with Sister Harris today, all the members of our district were at Kessler's apartment for his baptismal interview, getting chewed out by his staff. I don't think his baptism is going to happen. And then a little, like, discontented emoji face. I enjoyed the district meeting in Rapid. Elder Morgan is their district leader, and he came out with me in October. He's grown a lot since then. I was amazed at his energy and ability to make district meetings so fun. The role play room was cool. I played an investigator under the fire of 2 bold committing. It's nice to be back, though. Okay, so I'll explain the Kessler thing. So, I, to be honest, don't fully remember who Kessler is. I guess I think Kessler was an individual who was maybe autistic or had some sort of mental disability or physical disability or some, you know, he had some sort of disability, and I guess I think he had his own apartment, but I think that he had, like, caretakers who would come and help regularly enough, and I guess the missionaries had found him. I don't think I was the one, because I don't even really remember this, but the missionaries had found him, were trying to snap him up to get baptized, and his care staff, you know, stepped in and were like, no, he can't really consent to this, and rightfully shamed the missionaries for, like, trying to take advantage of this guy's situation, right? Which, now I am so happy that happened, and he is not a person that I now live to regret, like, baptizing, right? So thank you, so thankful, and thank you to the people who take care of the vulnerable people in their life. I'm thankful when the sort of social net that we all need to some extent. I'm thankful when it works, when people don't fall through the cracks, when people get the advocacy that they need. And I'm grateful that that happened. Yeah. Okay, and then we'll talk about the district meeting with Elder Morgan in the role play room. So, Elder Morgan, he'll be, I think, a recurring character going forward. He was one of the missionaries that a lot of the sisters kind of had crushes on, kind of like a charismatic, friendly, missionary. And he was showing his potential by rising the ranks quickly. So we had come out on our missions the same point, and he was already a district leader by, it was like four transfers in, maybe 4 or 5 transfers in. So pretty quick ascendancy to leadership. So he's, on his track to becoming zone leader and maybe assistant to the president. So I was amazed by how much he'd grown and how much leadership and responsibility he had, and kind of, I think, a little starry-eyed because of that. Of course, now I realize that just happens when you're a guy, or at least it's more likely to happen. I think if I took my current self and I gave myself the same idea of like what it is to be a missionary and who's a good missionary, I could easily point out that there were just as many, if not more, women sister missionaries who were just as capable as Elder Morgan and just as qualified for leadership, and perhaps more so, but would just never be given the opportunity because there were less leadership roles for sisters, and there weren't there was only one. You could be a sister training leader, and that was it. So I'm a little bit less awed by that, like awed as an AWED. It's a little less miraculous to me now. I'm like, oh yeah, it's just patriarchy in action. It's just, if someone is good at their work, conventionally attractive, not physically meaningfully disabled in a noticeable, visible sort of way, and is, if they're a guy, then if people see them doing well, they won't like hold them back from leadership. They'll just be like, oh yeah, I like you. You should get a raise, right? Whereas there are many people where they could be doing the exact same thing, the exact level of wellness, and not immediately be singled out as someone who should be promoted, right? Anyway, the role play room. I don't remember what that was. It sounds like a weird thing. It sounds I guess if I draw upon my missionary brain and I try to remember, I would guess that it's like a regular part of their district meetings. They would meet in one room and then they'd be like, okay, role playing is important and it's not fun, so we're going to try to make it a regular fun part of our district meetings. So, once a week we have our district meeting and then we all go to, I don't know, some classroom to practice role playing, and I guess I got to practice being an investigator and other people got to practice trying to get me to do something, but the point was for them to be like too intense so that I could like understand what it's like to have missionaries trying to be too intense at telling you to do something, and that would be uncomfortable, and I think I already knew it, and I didn't need that lesson in empathy. I think I could already tell that was uncomfortable. But whatever. We were doing the best we could, we kids. Okay. Saturday, May 2nd, 2015. Mission day 204. Wow. Just wow. And then just kind of a an emoji with a colon and then just like a straight line. So just like totally meh, right? Our closing prayer for finishing planning at 10:24 p.m. basically said this, quote, "We're grateful we were able to mow our apartment lawn so President Stockman would have time to spend with his family, even though he came and mowed it anyway. We're grateful we were able to help the yard sale be successful in raising money for girls' camp, even though none of them can go. And we're grateful we were able to help Sister Gutierrez fix her new trailer that they need to throw away. And we're grateful we were able to cheer up the Daltons a little bit after nobody came to Haley's baby shower for no good reason." Kind of irreverent, maybe. Sister Feist actually broke down in tears when President Stockman told us not to mow the lawn. Just, she especially wants so badly to help this branch, but no one will let us help. It's frustrating. But we missionaries, we're stubborn and persistent, and we will help everyone feel better whether they want it or not. The yard bake sale at the church building actually did go very well, though. We raised about $600. I personally invested 50 cents into the girls' camp fund with my purchase of one of Louise's chocolate chip cookies and one of her caramel rice crispy bars, which were amazing. I also got 2 silver, supposedly Montana silver, bracelets from the other sales around town. Sister Feist does retail therapy when she's upset. Yep, no baptism today. We even saw Kessler when we were at Sister Gutierrez's apartment, and it was really sad to not be able to talk with him. Okay, so a little more honesty today, right? And it kind of sounds like Sister Feist and I are sort of getting into the swing of things more, even though there is still some passive-aggressive stuff going on. It sounds like there was a big citywide yard sale event or something, but yeah, basically a whole day of us, everything we did was kind of just like all for naught, right? And just like everything was going wrong and it sucked. And this was one thing that I really admired about Sister Feist was how she was so persistent about like being helpful and like making a difference in the world, you know? And I think it's a shame that at this point, you know, like she had so much energy and so much drive and motivation, and I'm just imagine like, wow, what if instead of us going on missions when we turned 19, what if she had like gone to, I don't know, work at a nonprofit for 2 years, or even volunteering for like something where it's not just religious, not just converting people to religion, but like what if it was for like a actual real cause? Like, wow, I mean, you know, I wish that for myself, but I also wish that for her and, you know, for all of us. But she like really had, and still, you know, still does, but you know, at this point I could see how she had so much potential to do so much, and the spaces that we were allowed to do anything at all was pretty limited as, you know, young Mormon women. Yeah. So yeah, I can see just this energy of like, we're stubborn and persistent and we will help everyone feel better whether or not they want it. And I was like, that's such a good energy, and we're being pushed into this keyhole of learning to disrespect people's boundaries and to focus on, you know, a cause that now I really don't believe in. So it just feels like a big shame. Also, just quickly want to mention, oh my goodness, I can't believe Louisa was only charging 25 cents for her homemade chocolate chip cookies and Rice Krispie bars and stuff. Like, talk about women not being valued and women's work and contributions not being valued. Like, first of all, it is upsetting to me that the church makes the local congregations raise money for the girls' camp trips when they always give huge budgets for the boys to go on their Boy Scout trips. And I know they're not affiliated with Boy Scouts anymore. So I don't know what they're doing right now about the boys' activities versus the girls, but so frustrating that we always had to try to raise money for girls' camp and stuff, and here we are again. They still did raise a lot of money, which was really impressive since a lot of these women had been so trampled down by the church's lifelong teachings that they don't mean anything, that they would only charge 25 cents for a cookie. Is depressing. Yeah, and then I guess it wasn't P-Day, but there was other people having yard sales, and Sister Feist was upset about the whole day being so terrible, so we did stop and did retail therapy, and I was like blaming it on Sister Feist, but I too did go and buy some jewelry, so I mean, I looks like I had a beam in my own eye too, right? I don't know. It's complicated. And I'm glad that when we saw Kessler, we kept the boundary of not talking to him. Good job, us. I mean, it's the bare minimum, but I'm glad we at least did the bare minimum, right? I wouldn't have put it past us to ignore and just go through anyway. Anyway, okay, Sunday, May 3rd, 2015, Mission Day 205. Wow, I feel so much better today. Last night after writing, I was pondering on a purpose for my fast when I realized I'd better pray for hope. I prayed for hope for myself and whoever my companion may be, hope in the people we meet, strength to continue his work, and an understanding of what we can do to strengthen our area. I love fasting. I feel so much better already, and I know my prayer has begun to be answered. I also felt a lot of strength and peace from this sacrament. It's amazing the difference in feeling the Spirit, in focusing on our Savior as I've studied and taught about the importance of the sacrament. We had a pretty good lesson with Doug after dinner with the Goldsteins. I So reading through this, it's pretty big tonal 180, right? I had a bad day and I was like, this is not acceptable. So I just did the classic deep dive, recommit, and oh no, I'm so committed. I'm gonna sacrifice. I'm gonna be super, it's just I feel so much better already. I could tell now that I sort of felt better, but what it was I got a release from pressure by just having a sort of falsely curated recommittal and redoubling down and into intense orthodoxy and neuroticism, etc. And that last part, it was just I was reading it and I was like, this is just absolute gibberish. I can't even tell, there's no meaning behind what I'm writing here. I wrote, I also felt a lot of strength and peace from the sacrament. It's amazing the difference in feeling the Spirit and focusing on our Savior as I've studied and taught about the importance of the sacrament. It's gibberish. It's I'm totally disconnecting myself from, I had a day where I sort of had feelings And it was just like, no, I can't feel feelings. I can't feel upset. I can't feel discouraged. I gotta just pray to God. I gotta repent. I gotta recommit. I gotta fast. And I gotta say XYZ nonsense about Jesus to like convince myself and distract myself. I'm trying to think. There's a term for this of like, is it spiritual bypassing? I don't think that's the term, but it's like when you're trained to thought stopping cliches. Thought stopping. Yeah, it's like it looks like I'm just engaging in really intense thought stopping, down to the point of not even writing stuff that is like totally coherent. So, yeah, thought stopping, doubling down. Classic missionary stuff. And that's my 31st week as a Mormon sister missionary. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast if you want to continue following my story. Ratings and reviews are very helpful and very appreciated. And please share with anyone you think would be interested. I hope you have a great week. And if you want my advice, just remember that you can love others best when you love yourself first. Bye!